Some things you just can't do.
If it be your will that I speak no more, and my voice be still as it was before, I will speak no more. I shall abide until I am spoken for. If it be your will, if it be your will that a voice be true from this broken hill, I will sing to you. From this broken hill, all your praises they shall ring. If it be your will to let me sing.
Peace and richest blessings to all of you, all of the friends of the mother of conscious evolution, Barbara Marx Hubbard. We're here to celebrate her in such a way that not only do we remember her, but we pull from some of her spirit to keep on doing what we're called to do. I invite you to turn within with me for just a moment as we just center ourselves in the awareness that we're living, moving, and having our beingness in a great presence of life, the beauty of love and intelligence, and we allow for ourselves to be so grateful that we are awake, we're alive, that the impulse of the evolutionary spirit moves through us. We embrace sweet Barbara, who is continuing to grow, develop, and unfold in a whole nother realm of being. We bless each other and call forth a dynamic sense of peace of mind where she is concerned. We bless her family, her sacred friends, her sacred friendships, knowing that from this moment on, everything continues to unfold in the most perfect way as we embrace sweet Barbara Marx Hubbard. Amen. All of us on this line are aware, who are at this particular ceremony, are aware that birth is not the beginning and death is not the end, and birth and death are a parenthesis into a human incarnation. And we're here to celebrate that human incarnation of Barbara Marx Hubbard. I'll always remember she was a co-founder with a number of us of the Association for Global Thought. And we had the opportunity to forge a deep and meaningful and powerful relationship. One of the funniest things I remember about her, I'm Michael Beckwith, by the way. One of the funniest things I remember about her is there was one night we were at an event and we hung out all night, and I went home and I got a call in the middle of the night. She had been rushed to the hospital and she was refusing to be seen unless she saw her personal doctor or had a chance to talk to her personal doctor. And she told him that her doctor was Michael Beckwith, Dr. Michael Beckwith. So I received this call about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and the individuals were on the other end from the hospital and said, "Are you Dr. Michael Beckwith?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, Barbara Marx Hubbard is not going to allow us to work on her until she talks to you." And I said, "Okay, let me speak to her." And then she told me what was going on. We had a prayer together. I said, "Barbara, please allow the doctors to work with you." She said, "Okay, Michael, it's going to be okay." I said, "Yes, it's going to be okay." And they gave the phone back to me. I said, yes, I approve that you can work on her. And we went on, and she went on to heal from that particular situation. Tremendous love, tremendous visionary, a tremendous advocate of peace, tremendous networker, just a tremendous being. And it was my joy to collaborate with her and to love her deeply. Continue to stay tuned for more great people to just remember Barbara Marx Hubbard.
I am Erin McCabe of Unity Village Chapel. Barbara Marx Hubbard, 89, noted futurist thinker and popularizer of conscious evolution, passed away on the evening of April 10th, 2019, in Loveland, Colorado, surrounded by her family. She saw humanity's purpose as to fulfill our creative potential and collectively evolve toward a divine potential, which she envisioned as becoming a universal species. Buckminster Fuller said of Hubbard, "There is no doubt in my mind that Barbara Marx Hubbard, who helped introduce the concept of futurism to society, is the best informed human now alive regarding futurism and the foresights it has produced." New York Times columnist Ross Douthat said of Hubbard, "I suspect that the religious trends that a figure like Hubbard embodies, which lead further away from core Christian ideas without shaking off the Christian influence entirely, may be more important to the future of American religion than the more familiar post-1960s story that the press has been telling." In 1984, her name was placed in nomination for the vice presidency on the Democratic ticket. On the convention floor, she delivered a speech proposing an office of the future to map, track, connect, and communicate what is working, and a peace room as sophisticated as a war room in the office of the vice president. In recent years, she worked closely with the women's religious of the Catholic Church to bring forth her radical evolutionary approach to the New Testament. Barbara's books include The Hunger of Eve, Conscious Evolution, and Emergence. Neil Donald Walsh wrote a biography, The Mother of Invention. She was the subject of the recent documentary film, American Visionary. Barbara was the co-chair of the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, the co-founder of the World Future Society and the Club of Budapest. In 1997, she co-founded the Association for Global New Thought. She helped shape our evolutionary vision for many years and will always be a beloved, irreplaceable member of our New Thought community.
We are cropping up everywhere, what I call the new humans. Does it feel new? Are we giving birth to the next stage of human species, folks? Do you think so? What are the qualities of the new human that nature is once again out of this crisis producing something new? The new human has got an evolutionary spirituality that he incarnates the impulse of evolution personally. Does anybody think they've just finished? They've done everything they need to do? Do I? No. So it's a quality of the new human. You never are finished. Why? Because the impulse of evolution is you and is in you. And when you know it's in you and you say yes, consciously to the impulse, what it does is reveal to you more and more of its characteristics. In other words, you get a picture of what you might be moving toward if you place yourself in the story of evolution and you know where are you going toward? Higher consciousness, greater freedom of the individual, and more complex and loving order. Is that right? Does anybody feel the desire for more consciousness, more freedom, more complex order? Well, that's really good, because that's evolution inside you desiring that. We didn't make up that desire. That desire is making us up. And when you say yes to it, and if you'll say a big and loud yes to it, I've noticed this in myself, it turns on big time. And then you get more and more and more that you need to do. The name of the new human, as we are expressing it, is Homo Amore Universalis. Homo Amore Universalis would be the species of humanity coming out of the synergistic convergence of the emergence within us as individuals. But nature is doing its magic again. It's creating synergy that we don't necessarily have to do, even be conscious that we're doing. But if we are conscious that we're doing it, and we do have an opportunity to be, I would say, consciously synergistic, or like in a SynCon type thing, coming together to co-create, then I believe we could collectively experience, perhaps for the first time collectively, what it's like to be Homo Amore Universalis.
This is Dr. Deepak Chopra. I met Barbara Max Hubbard in the late 1980s, so over 30 years ago, at a conference in Hawaii. And then, synchronistically speaking, I happened to be on a flight with her, sitting next to her on a plane for 6 hours. And I discovered who she was. And this was 30 years ago when I heard from her the phrase conscious evolution. And that phrase stuck with me, influenced me in the last 3 decades. I always thought of her as my older sister and my mentor, and periodically checked in with her for advice and inspiration. A few years ago, we founded Ishar, which is a nonprofit library, and our first task was to honor her and her work. So if you're interested in looking at some of her work, you can check it out over there. We house a lot of her contributions to our understanding of human consciousness and how the universe is evolving through us. And so she's been our leader, our inspiration for conscious evolution. And I think now it's our responsibility to continue the great force and impulse that she was of the universe, consciously evolving into a new species. It is important that we do this, not only because it is a tribute to her greatness and her vision and her love and her inspiration and her insight, but because unless we do so, we are moving forward in a very destructive way. We have seen how even religions have become divisive and quarrelsome, and are actually directly or indirectly now the victims of violence, and also in many cases the contributors of violence. So as Barbara gave us the religious experience, true insight into the nature of transcendence, Platonic values like love, compassion, joy, equanimity, and knowing our timeless being as beyond birth and death, always recycling at a higher level of awareness, so we can finally all together create that critical mass of consciousness for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. This is Barbara's pioneering work, and let us dedicate our lives to continuing what she inspired in all of us. This is my message of love to all of you and my deep appreciation for how Barbara affected my own life.
Thank you to Deepak Chopra. Thank you so much. I am Dr. Michelle Medrano. I'm from Mile High Church in Denver. I'm here along with the Association for Global New Thought board members. We are going to take some time now to share some of our stories of Barbara, and you'll hear from some of us, and then after that you will hear from Barbara's daughter and sister. And as we share our stories, we recognize that Barbara Marx Hubbard was a light in this world. There was light that emanated from her beautiful eyes. Her thoughts ignited thoughts of light for all of us as we got to hear her. She was an emissary of light on the planet. So with each of our sharings, you're going to see, if you're watching on video, a candle be placed in our hands at the end of our stories, and we're going to place the candles on this table next to me as a representation of the light that Barbara is. And we encourage you to acknowledge the light that she has been in your life by thinking about the stories of times you've been enlightened by her presence, and maybe even light a candle right where you are today as a dedication to the light that Barbara is still. So my story is a very quick one. I was honored in 1993 to be able to attend the Parliament for the World's Religions in Chicago, Illinois. I was a brand new, very young minister, and I knew that going there I was going to see a representation of many religions, but I assumed it would probably be most of the more traditional religions of the world. I had high hopes that my New Thought tradition would be represented, but I wasn't totally sure. And it was so encouraging and joyous to see Barbara Marx Hubbard stand on that stage of that parliament, which it was the first one that had been held for 100 years, and represent New Thought, be a powerful woman of wonderful inspiration. And she inspired me and my ministry. And I thank you, Barbara Marx Hubbard, for the light that you are and have been in my life.
I'm Reverend Dr. Temple Hayes. I represent First Unity Spiritual Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida. To wish upon a star is progress. To know you are a star is evolution. Barbara Marx Hubbard, from the moment that she showed up on this earth, she started creating circles. Perhaps her first circle was around the entire world. There was something unique about her that she knew that she represented the collective of everything and everyone. And she held that space and took it so seriously. Many of us through the years were spellbound by her knowledge, her wisdom, and yet her simplicity and her approachability to love and to welcome and to embrace. To me, I loved the fact of how she walked her essence and her being. A personal story was that I was visiting Dr. Barbara Fields, and she was the neighbor to Barbara Marx Hubbard. And it's like, well, let's go and sit down and see what happens today. And so when we entered the home, and anytime Barbara Marx Hubbard was around, there was a circle. And so we got there, and they said, well, Barbara's back. She's doing some kind of interview for a major network, and then she just got, was talking to the newspaper, but she'll be right out. And she enters the room, and there she saw yet again a circle, a time to bring the energies of life before her. And we gathered around, and she became totally present. So regardless of who knew her or how she was known, she could always be present with a thinking tank of, let's see what kind of movement can be born right here and right now. I hold a candle in my heart of the love for what she represented.
Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. Ken Gordon. I'm the spiritual leader for Centers for Spiritual Living, and I am just so honored to be here to bid farewell to such a bright light as Barbara Marx Hubbard. Her tenure on this plane has been as an iconic spiritual leader. And my story, as you've heard so many others, and I'm sure you have your own, my story is really when I was first starting out about 30 years ago, the first opportunity I had to hear Dr. Barbara speak was at a conference at some place. And I always remember the talk that she gave, or the metaphor and the story that she gave, which really transformed and deepened my own belief in this thing called New Thought. And I remember the story went like this. She said, can you imagine if you were a disembodied soul and you're taken back 500,000 years on this planet and you're standing with an angel or a spirit with you and you're looking out at the primordial ooze and the burning lava. And can you imagine looking at that and looking across and seeing that rock and have that spirit next to you say to you, do you believe someday that that rock will rise and have dominion over this world? And she said, well, just look around at you because that's what you are. That's where you came from. Her advanced idea of conscious evolution is the transformative movement that is required for New Thought to move into a new era. Understanding that it's possible that what we can do is we can actually consciously grow ourselves so that we rise above the dark ages, we rise above the times where we're perhaps haven't been so accepting, and we fall into, as Don Miguel Ruiz says, the mitote of life, the fog, and instead allow ourselves to be able to consciously move forward, doing the things that are required so that we might awaken and make the world a better place. Dr. Barbara talks about a new species of humanity, as you've heard earlier, and that new species needs to be nurtured and it needs to be supported, and it calls upon each and every one of us to be part of that movement, to be able to awaken within our own selves the light and the brightness that we, of course, saw in Barbara Marx Hubbard. So I bless Barbara. I know without a question that anyone who is bigger than life must certainly be bigger than death. And so I know that she's moved on and is making a place for each and every one of us in the new consciousness of a new being. And so thank you, Barbara. Appreciate you immensely.
Many blessings. I'm Reverend Deborah Johnson from Inner Light Ministries in Santa Cruz, California. As you've been hearing all of these stories about the way in which Barbara Marx Hubbard has touched people's lives and the personal interchanges and exchanges that they've had, the thing that just comes to me the most is the idea of integration and inspiration. That I feel like I'm part of that legacy, that she may not be on this earth plane anymore, but she has left something that's going to continue on. She's part of the shoulders upon which I and so many other people stand. In that integration, she pulled it all together. I grew up at a time where everything was separate. Religion was over here and science was over there and politics was over there and social justice was over here and environmental stuff was over there. And I feel like I had to run around and be in all these different kind of movements. And Barbara just helped to pull it all together and to give a foundation upon which we could stand that was solid enough, that was broad enough and inclusive enough that I could feel like a whole human being. And that inspiration was so deep, particularly as a woman. And in growing up in a tradition where women still aren't even allowed to be ordained, that this idea that you could be bold, that you could have a voice, that you could be 89 years old and still doing it and still listening is just inspiration beyond anything that I could even say. So to Barbara, I just want to say, long live your legacy in each and every one of us. And we will now hear from her daughter, Suzanne Hubbard.
Oh, thank you, Barbara Fields and members of the Association for Global New Thought for including this memorial during your retreat, as it adds a real contemplative aspect to this remembrance. And if I can just work through my grief, I just remember three things that really have been important to me that my mother gave me. And one was she instilled in all of us that you didn't have to change with the times if the times were dehumanizing, that you had a choice. And that had to do with her seminal question, what is the purpose of our powers that could serve a greater good? And her answer to that question was, you better not leave the future up to chance, that they will be used for peaceful purposes. So the next thing that she instilled in me was that, just as that video was showing, is that we're a part of an evolutionary story. And that greatly transformed my life as a mother, weaver, and gardener. So if evolution is evolving through me, then it's like those vocations have an absolutely different story than maybe they are looked at in the usual way. And they have a great impact. Now, what I realized too is when you experience your life as a part of the evolutionary story, you're not only thinking, but you're intuiting and you're imagining and you're sensing the message that evolution is communicating to you in your unique field. And the final gift that she gave me actually occurred right before she died. There was a very painful moment before we knew that she was not responsive, that there was a chance that she could be resuscitated. But as I said, it showed from her sort of brain graphs that she was unresponsive. We had to decide whether to resuscitate or to allow her to die a natural death. And there were 9 family members surrounding her and engaged in that question. And we were in Loveland. And when we were thinking about this, it was 80 degrees that day, and we couldn't come up with a decision. And then the next day, it was 19 and a blizzard. And sort of in the middle of this white blizzard, we were just expanding our understanding to tune into my mother. What would she want? And we were tuning into the hearts of each other. And the last thing that my mother wished to do, which she wasn't able to do, was to have a planetary awakening event. But then I realized that this whole process of opening your heart and opening your imagination and tuning into my mother's spirit, but also to everybody else's heart, that's exactly what one does when evolution is evolving through you. It's the same sensitivity, and it's really through the heart. And so what I realized was, okay, there wasn't a planetary awakening. It was the planet awakening through us in love. And so in some ways she achieved it. So what I'm grateful for is that all of you are carrying her message in your unique ways. And it's matured since she began a long time ago asking that question. And many pieces of the answers have been filtering through all of your work. So I'm extremely grateful for all of you. And thank you. And please light a candle for me.
Is it my turn? So I was there with Suzanne and the other children and my sister and her daughter at Barbara's dying. And it was such a shock to us. But also, it was just the way Barbara had said to a friend, told me just recently. She said, if you're going to die, do it quickly. Just get it over with. And so Barbara, we went in. I saw a picture of her in the hospital bed Friday and radiant. She'd just been teaching a class. And then by the time I arrived, which was a day later, she was gone. She was not in her body. And it was a weird experience seeing this body that was not Barbara anymore, because her spirit was in the room, but not in her body. And she did it without pain and without stress. It was a peaceful death. And we kind of grew deeper, even in our love. We've always been a close family, but one of the gifts she gave us was this burden of deciding whether we try to resuscitate or not. And it became clear it wouldn't have worked and it would have been terrible. So it was a very loving but shocking experience. And someone mentioned it earlier. For me, the thing that I loved most about Barbara, and I just adored her, by the way, our mother died when I was quite young, on the eve of my 6th birthday. And Barbara was 8 years older, so she became something of a mother to me, very much a mother as well as a loving sister. And it's the energy that she emanated that was contagious. She'd come and visit often, or we'd go on expeditions, and I'd come and listen to her at some major event she was presenting at. And the feeling of being with her in the morning, coming in, she'd get up very early, wake up, and she'd be writing in her journal. I think Deepak took a lot of the journals there, so it's wonderful that they're housed in a sacred place. And we'd be kind of having revelations and epiphanies, to use Barbara's words, and the feeling, whatever we said, and it all seemed very profound and uplifting, was this joy and bliss of being in her presence, connected to her heart. And she was extraordinary in that. I think she was a true mystic and an enthusiast, inspired by God. And that the vision that she had, it's interesting. I set her up with an appointment with a teacher of mine, Anna Wise, who worked with biofeedback and expanded states of consciousness. And Barbara had the session, and afterwards I had a session with Anna, and I said, how would the session go? And she said, it was amazing. She said, I've seen thousands of people and measured their brainwaves and have evolved this awakened mind, which I teach. Only twice among all these thousands of deep meditators, yogis, creative artists, have I seen a pattern that I called the evolved mind, which was kind of oval shaped. And she said, when your sister talked about her mission, she went into the evolved mind. I've never seen anything like it, with eyes open, speaking. That was the first time I ever saw that. So I think that Barbara did have the capacity to go to a very unusually high state of mind, and that is what radiated through her. I remember being much younger than she, but we were invited to the White House when Eisenhower was president, because my dad was a warm acquaintance of his. And I was there when she said, Mr. President, what in your opinion is the meaning of our power that is good? And Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, said, young lady, I have no idea. And then she said, well, we better find out. And I think a lot of her life's mission was trying to find that, to create a wheel of co-creation where all the projects that were worthwhile would be placed into their various sectors of society where they belonged, and then there'd be synergy between the people. She was a great lover of synergy, and one person that was at a conference that she created, a synergistic convergence conference, was trying to get marijuana legalized before it was legal. And he evidently got up there at the end of the conference and said, "This is the greatest high I've ever had." And I think Barbara created that. I loved her language. It had a kind of tinge with erotic and the juiciness of her own being. Things like vocational arousal, suprasex, when people fused genius instead of genes, or fulfilling your deepest heart's desire, your passion to create. She was such a passionate cheerleader for humanity. And as Suzanne said, the vision that she really evolved all her life, and in its final form, was planetary awakening in love. And I just want to say that she gave me so many gifts, but right now, when I think of her, which is often every day, and feel the grief and the loss and, the horror of the thought of not being able to call her up or see her again, it's very, very painful. But at the same time, my heart gets flooded with this joy and love when I think of her and commune with her and send her my love. And I really just want to say that her spirit will be in everyone that reaches out to her and brings her presence into your consciousness. And she'll be encouraging you, I love these words, to love more, to be more, to create more, and to say a big yes to life. So in closing, I just want to say, Barbara, I love you. I will love you all my life. And I just thank you for all you gave me, all you are still giving me, and pray that you find a wonderful home in the evolving universe. Thank you.
If it be your will.
So how do we practice conscious evolution? Well, there are three obvious ways. The first is spiritual and personal. We feel, many millions of us, within ourselves a rising intuition, yearning to be more, to create more, to participate more, to help more in the healing and evolving of a suffering world. And that spiritual impulse, from my understanding, is the impulse of evolution, awakening in us, whatever our religion, whatever our faith, whatever our culture, transcending all of the past, is the evolving human. There's no reason to assume that evolution stops here with us in our current model of a furry biped with an eternal spirit seeking to co-create with this power. We are in transition. So I see that our spiritual evolution is tuning in to the impulse of creation within us and saying, yes, I will find my life purpose. Yes, I will express my deeper self. Yes, I will become an evolving human. The second way we practice conscious evolution is through social evolution. We discover, when we look out, a world in need, Every system is breaking down. Our healthcare system, our educational systems, our governing systems, our economic systems, our environmental systems. Well, you can't just grow spiritually and personally without being drawn to that. So you begin to want to find your greater life purpose and your project, your initiative, your contribution to the world. And that is also the impulse of conscious evolution, because we're realizing we're responsible for the development of a society that's viable, sustainable, and even more self-generative based on all our new powers. So most of us are discontent. Most of us are frustrated, even in our jobs, in our professions, because we know there's more. Social evolution is the internalization of conscious evolution towards society. And then if
And now we welcome Jean Houston.
I'm going to speak directly to you, Barbara. Because, Barbara, I have known thee of old. I mean, both in historical and on present space-time transits that we took together. You met first on postal mail. Remember that? In 1965, when you were writing the center letter, a magnificent potpourri of ideas and visions and call to arms and winsome, wise roads towards new ways of being. You were involved in a kind of wake-up call from Central. You had an advanced nervous system. You were, how would I describe you, flaming spirit in feisty flesh. You had an enlarged antenna on the cosmos. Thereafter, we met, oh, so many, many times, often finding ourselves together, forging together on the frontiers of thought, where others thought us crazy or at best somewhat eccentric. You were already a practical mystic, encountering dreams of tomorrow and transcendent travels for today. I, on the other hand, was always earthbound and looking for ways to improve the present human condition, while you were already way ahead, aspiring to a new species version of the possible human. You know, but at the same time, you remained a deep-rooted blossomer, raising children, grandchildren, and generations who could respond to your unique lure of becoming. And as you grew older, you seemed to become younger, rewriting the decades as the time of regenopause, taking on more and more, and yet still more, writing, teaching, running for president, or at least vice president, creating spirals of networks, offering both the vision and the practice of becoming the ones who are the difference, who can then make the difference. On your table at homes, when I would come and stay with you, there was always something very interesting. Maps of the future, methods for whole system transition, programs to create a culture of evolution. And you rarely ever faltered in your mission. And when the bad times came, you picked yourself up and you then found yourself in a new place of the spiral, engendering with new ways of being. And this I know, Barbara, this I know, wherever and however you are, you will not stop. You, not you. You are a circuit rider for cosmic education, and that is why all beings, both visible and invisible, will rightly say, hey, you know that Barbara Marx covered? She does not bore God. So in honor of that, I have a few words for you about yourself. I call it Cosmic Mother Comes Calling. Here she comes, the Aleph herself, quantum lady wearing a garment of holograms, universes couched in the crook of her elbow. Stars and galaxies sparkle in her hair, as do diadems of dimensions, planets beyond counting, and beings by the trillions. Time does not count by her measure, nor does space, nor separation. She is the ever expressing, ever creating mystery, the womb of all becoming. Imagine immensities, and you still can't grasp her. Look at a flower, and you understand her completely. She is all and she is no thing. She is the cosmic mother, the one in the many and the many in the one on our planet, perhaps in many others. We call her by many names, many variants of herself. Athena, consciousness, the absolute, Hera, Demeter, the quantum field, the Akashic recorder, Mary, Isis, the great mother, Spider Woman, Corn Mother, Amaterasu, the mind that is minding, Queen of Heaven, great goddess, life force, creation, Kuan-Yin, and above all, mother, 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 and of course, Barbara Marx Hubbard. She comes now looking for you. Cosmic Mother sees a planet in transition, a species in transition, a need to speciate, to move to another level. And so she has come, and so she has left this plane and moves on as the great variant of Cosmic Mother to create a new world, a new time, a new species. Thank you.
And now we welcome Rinaldo Brutoco.
My very dear sister Barbara, more than 35 years ago, when you were still living at the Gray Mansion in Washington, I was instructed to go find you and meet you and discover this incredible being who was a maternal force for conscious evolution. Although she didn't have quite that name for it then, it's what evolved. And as I came to know her over the years, obviously people called her futurist, people called her visionary, and she called herself a pioneer. I urge you all to go back and read the first couple of chapters of the book that she was instrumental in, Birth 2012. I was very privileged to be one of the authors of Birth 2012, as was Jean. And in it, she gives a very complete description of herself. And she talks about her journey in a way that leaves me knowing today with complete confidence that I am not going to miss you, Barbara, because I don't think you're ever going to leave me. In fact, I don't think you're leaving any of us. What Barbara demonstrated in the purest tradition of a Thomas Edison, that her genius, and she was a genius, was 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. She just kept going and going and going and going. And if any of us could think of adjectives, and nobody could do it better than Jean, that would describe her, I would put in indefatigable in that list. And I want to share some of the things, at least 2 or 3, that were important to her. The meme makers, who she claimed really affected her. Betty Friedan, who wrote in The Feminine Mystique and helped Barbara to realize that her depression at being a housewife and having no greater meaning than that was not an acceptable alternative for her life. And it opened her up to an entirely new consciousness of, now I search for what it is I am to do. Another enormously powerful influence on her was Abraham Maslow. And in Maslow, she found this incredible being of altered theory and consciousness looking to stitch together the world we now take for granted, which is a world in which agent doesn't seem like an odd idea, but the natural consequence of people like Barbara and Abraham Maslow having lived with us. And you know, he wrote this very interesting thing to Barbara when she was, after he had his major heart attack. He said, Barbara, don't give up. You are life itself. And when you heard the quote earlier from Bucky Fuller, which you've all heard many times, when you've heard the other quotes about Barbara from really wonderful people who've loved her dearly, and I'm sorry Hazel Henderson is not on this call today because she and Barbara had this wonderful thing where Hazel was the earth child and Barbara was the star child. And I fully embraced with Barbara one thing that she talked about a lot, and that was the work of Teilhard de Chardin, who Jean also shared with us. And you know, Chardin said something which I think is captured and we should quote for today, because all those candles are a form of fire. And what Barbara actually thought was one of the more profound things, and most of what Teilhard did was profound, she wanted to quote his prophecy for us, which I believe was the prophecy for Barbara Marx Hubbard. It was, quote, "Someday, after mastering winds, waves, tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love, and then, for the second time in the history of the world, humans will discover fire." The fire that we discovered was Barbara Marx Hubbard. And I would love to leave you all with a sense of the profound honor and joy I have had for all these years to know her, to share in her wisdom, to co-create her fantasies, and to co-create her many, many different ways of articulating some very basic principles. And therefore, in the end, to celebrate. And I want to end by a quote that I think really sums up why it is we are all so enamored with Barbara Marx Hubbard. And it goes something like this. Some of you will know it. It's by the, I'm trying to find it. Well, the quote goes, "What will matter in the end? You lived on, but in the end, it won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, and courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will not matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel at a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories that live on in those who loved you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance, but of choice. Choose to live a life that matters. Harold Kushner. I just want to say thank you, Barbara, for living a life that mattered so very much to so many of us in so many ways. God bless.
Now, may I introduce to you Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Every now and then somebody will say to me, not so much now, but they used to, "Whoa, you're so idealistic, Barbara. Look at human nature. How could you imagine that we could change?" So my answer always is, could you tell me how we got from subatomic particles to you and me now? I found that every time the whole system hit up with a crisis that couldn't be resolved by doing more of the same, there was a jump in consciousness and freedom through more complex order. And I was able to put humanity in the 14 billion year story and recognize that it's the first time in the 14 billion years that any species was caught in a quantum jump and became conscious. That by their own actions they could change it or destroy themselves. And if we got from subatomic particles to here through all these crises, my absolute faith is that it couldn't turn off with us. There's absolutely no way that the force of creation that brought us would turn off just exactly when the species is becoming conscious of the force and of the design of the process of creation, such that we can co-create with it. And in my language, what's happening on Earth is that millions of us are giving birth within ourselves to a universal human. Every person who is suprasexually, that means your creativity is aroused at the very same passion that we created and reproduced our species. We are going to express that procreative love into a co-creative love, and every one of us is imbued with a tremendous creative expression that is yearning to go out. It's the time for the feminine to give birth to the authentic feminine self. I asked for a word to symbolize what was happening to me, and the word I received was regenopause. Because when the feminine self lives long enough to be expressing that divine feminine in partnership with men, but fully liberated to go the whole way, she becomes the missing link of our species. And we're not going to save this world by guilt and fear alone. We're going to save this world by the passion to join our genius to create.
And my name is Reverend Dr. David Goldberg, and it's my honor to serve as the publisher of Science of Mind magazine. And as a lover of words, one of the many things I honored about Barbara is her love of words and the fluidity with she used them and how things flowed and how she was able to make the complex understandable. And another lover of words, another practical mystic, is Ernest Holmes, credited with being the founder of religious science. And I will offer this reading from Ernest Holmes, Above and Beyond. For every tear that's shed, some rose tree blooms red, some simple prayer is said to one who hears. From out of the darkest night, the sun breaks warm and bright and fills the earth with light and brings new day. For every wind that blows, some new tide gently flows, some happy hearth fire glows with warmth and love. Beyond life's hurt and pain, new courage springs again and sings a new refrain to make life glad. From all that comes to naught, some higher good is brought, some greater lesson is taught to help the world. Beyond that which would destroy, love all its arts employ to fill the heart with joy and bring new hope. And when life's span is run beyond earth's setting sun, another life's begun in God's heaven. From cosmic stardust swirled and endless time unfurled, God spins another world for his delight.
And so we have heard the powerful eulogies for our beloved Barbara Marx Hubbard. We have heard the love, the affection, and how she has impacted our lives in such a powerful way. And so as we come together on this day, we don't ask the question, what is the meaning of her passing? The question that we ask is, how can we give our life meaning based on knowing her? And today we have heard, embrace the evolutionary impulse that governs all creation. Continue to say yes to your becoming. Continue to be aware that whatever it is that we're facing as a species, there's something within us that is seeking to emerge that's greater than the issues that are now facing us. So we are aware that it's not what we're facing, ultimately because of the evolutionary urgency that's within us, it's what's facing us. And what the issues are facing is infinite potential. What the issues are facing is an impulse that's untouched by time or experience, undaunted by anything in the world. And so we give our life meaning by knowing Barbara Marx Hubbard, and we go forth and live a powerful, dynamic, loving, intentional life. And then she continues to live in us in a very powerful way. Thank you all for tuning in. We will continue to remember Barbara Marx Hubbard and be aware that we are the light that lights up every man and every woman that comes into the world, representing the cosmic unfolding. peace, and richest blessings.
Hmm.